Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Dyer, and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, August the 9th. Let me get right to introducing you to this week's panel of insiders. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward, Eric Sonderman, columnist with Colorado Politics and the Colorado Springs and Denver Gazettes, Tyrone Glover, leading civil rights and criminal defense attorney here in Denver, and Laura Aldrete, a city building consultant and former planning director for the city and county of Denver. With 12 weeks to go before Election Day, the two main political parties are in overdrive. On Tuesday, as you know, Vice President Kamala Harris chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate on the Democratic ticket. Meanwhile, the head of the Republican ticket is headed to Colorado this weekend. Donald Trump will attend a fundraiser in Aspen on Saturday. Could all of this attention on the people who are running for president and vice president overshadow all that is on the Colorado ballot? Patty, let's start with you. We're hearing that the Colorado ballot could be pages and pages long this year.
At least 4, probably 5. We still have several ballot measures on the state level which are in play. They're going over signatures right now. Everything's been turned in, but there's 6 more that are in limbo. In the city of Denver, we already have 9, and there could be more. We're looking at, on the state level, ranked choice voting is going to be a big one. We don't have Amber here to talk to us about it, but just trying to get your mind around ranked choice voting could take you days, as opposed to all the other ballot measures. We're looking at affordability, both we might have property tax pulled from the ballot or on the ballot. There's still talk about a potential special session, which we should have had last year because we've been talking about property tax an awful long time. Affordability in Denver, the surprise ballot initiative, Mike Johnston, he surprised people in city council with it. They've been working on that to see if they can come up with a compromise. I think 2 weeks ago I said I thought that it would be pulled. I think they might get it on the ballot, but I don't think it'll win.
Okay. Eric, your thoughts on this week?
Well, this whole election season, particularly ever since the debate at the end of June, seems like it's just been on fast forward. More happens in a week than traditionally happens in months in campaigns. It's one thing after another. Democrats now on a national level are so excited and so energized. I guess I would interject a note of caution. Obviously, they're in much better shape than they were a month ago. But I think there's a phrase in financial markets about irrational exuberance. And I would caution the Democrats that this map is still a very difficult map. This is going to be a very close race, even if they come out on top of this race. So I would caution against excess enthusiasm. There are still some tough days ahead. Since we vote by mail, I'm hoping that the ballots come with maybe a pack of caffeine or an energy drink or something like that, because just sitting down at the kitchen table and filling out the ballot is going to be quite the exercise. We'll talk over these coming weeks about different ballot issues, but the sheer volume of them is quite formidable and a lot for voters to sort out.
Tyrone.
Yeah, and maybe we don't need the energy drink because the enthusiasm right now, and hopefully we sustain it for the next 12 weeks around this election, is just really been ramped up. Now with the Democratic ticket really trying to meet the MAGA folks with the enthusiasm, with really going after the online attention. And so historically, ballot measures, typically are advantaged by high voter turnout, by high engagement, especially when we're coming off a 2020 election, which was a little wonky. We were in the middle of a pandemic. So it seems like a lot of folks are taking advantage of this next cycle in the interjection of energy.
Okay. Laura.
I was researching a little bit about the Trump fundraiser this weekend in Aspen and came across an AP article that talked about Republicans for Harris campaign that the Harris-Walz campaign has started, where they are doing outreach, and I think they'll really need to boost her DA record. They'll probably need to downplay her Senate positions. But Walz, I think in particular for Colorado, I think he is pragmatic. I think we see a lot of people moving from the Midwest to Colorado, so I think he will resonate with those newer populations moving in. Historically, we typically get Midwest folks. And I think he could play it like a Jason Crow, who is moderate and has perhaps more traditional values, but is clearly a Democrat. So I think it is positive for the Democrats here in Colorado.
And the Trump event in Saturday in Aspen is not a rally. It's a private party,
Correct.
big-time fundraiser.
Very private.
Yes.
Let's not forget, one of the last times Trump was in Aspen or made headlines there was when Ivana had a big fight with Marla Maples, his next wife, on the slopes.
I had forgotten about
Oh,
that.
I'll send you all the information.
Okay, all right. Every week between now and November the 5th, we are going to take on one issue that will be on the ballot, either locally or statewide. This week, I want to start with an issue that Denver voters will be deciding upon, but it's something that could have statewide financial implications. The Common Sense Institute has released a report looking into the proposed Denver slaughterhouse ban. And the CSU's Regional Economic Development Institute has done its own research as well. A group that protects animal rights introduced on the ballot measure, a ballot measure which calls for getting rid of all slaughterhouses in Denver within 2 years from now. And Eric, if this were to pass, this would be the first ban of its kind in the entire country.
You wonder if the ballot is the right venue for making these decisions, whether it's about wildlife management in the case of wolves, or even if it's about slaughterhouses in the case of this particular ballot initiative. These are complicated issues. In this case, it's ultimately a land use issue. I think there's also elements of social justice involved. My supposition is it's likely to pass. I mean, this is Denver. It's an easy vote for Denver voters to cast. Somehow, unless we're going to get rid of meat in this country and lamb as well as beef, slaughterhouses are going to be somewhere. You know, it reeks of an attitude of, okay, not for me, but okay for thee. Not here in Denver, where we're all so refined, but move it outside of Denver and let other voters and other citizens of the state deal with it. And I don't know that that's all that becoming an attitude.
Yeah, and I feel like it's being pitched as this animal rights issue, but it's as much an environmental justice issue as well. And I think that's when we see the discussions around this, really where a lot of it is going to come down to. You know, and this isn't, you know, there's not like a bunch of slaughterhouses that are all going to get kicked out of the city and county. It's one slaughterhouse that processes lamb, and it's in the most polluted zip code in the entire country. And we have 3 years running of Clean Water Act violations where they're dumping toxins into the Platte River. And so we have this densely populated area, an area which has not seen, I think, some of the economic growth because of all of the industry and all of the pollution. And they've been yelling from the mountaintop about wanting some sort of fix. And we're not talking about the entire Denver metro area either. It's just the city and county. There's still room in Adams County, Centennial, Jefferson County. It could be moved into a less densely populated, less polluted, less under-resourced area at the end of the day.
Okay, all right, Laura.
Well, I think the claim about environmental justice does not stand in this particular case. Has the GES community been underserved, and is it the most polluted zip code in the country? 100%. But that is because of the smelter plant that was there, has been there for 120 years, not because of this particular rendering plant. So I feel this is an advocacy group going after one business that's employee owned, and it doesn't feel like it's a good use of government or government tools to legislate out one land use, one business. And I feel like that's what they are targeting. Should, Globeville, Elyria, Swansea also has 3 new CSU buildings that have been built there. The Cattle Exchange building is being redeveloped, and the city has committed and spent $900 million in infrastructure improvement. So to say that there are no resources going into that community, I think does not stand.
And I'm not saying there's no resources. It is still under-resourced. And I think as we've seen property values skyrocket in the city and county, the property values there, I don't think have increased in commensurate levels, in large part because of the stench coming from that processing plant. And if you just look up, and it's publicly available, the EPA record, I think the fact, they are polluting, and they have been for the last 3 years. They've been out of compliance. They're actually, I think, in violation within the last 3 quarters. So I don't think that that's consistent with what you can actually see and find online.
Patty, your thoughts?
Well, this is actually across the Platte from where the National Western is. And it's not Suncor, which I suppose people could say they want to go after, which is definitely a polluter. It's not Purina, which is the bigger smell. It is this employee-owned slaughterhouse, the only one in the city, which is not so much in a residential area. It's more in a warehouse area. It is owned by employees. There's no excuse for not behaving and following the laws correctly, so you would hope they follow the agenda, but is it Denver voters' job to vote down one business? At that point, you might as well just go say, Cherry Cricket charges too much for their hamburgers, and we're going to vote them out of Denver. I think we really need to study this one closely and not just think it's sweet little lambs or it's jobs by a company-owned place. I heard the owner, or the CEO, not the owner, because it is employee-owned, talk about what this will mean to the people who will lose their jobs. And it's very moving. It's also moving if you see pictures of little lambs. So it's one everyone in Denver should research.
All right. Thank you for your insight, everybody. This summer is flying by, but it wasn't that long ago when pro-Palestinian protesters set up an encampment on Denver's Auraria campus, and eventually there was one over at the University of Denver as well. And Tyrone, there is now a push for a Denver city attorney to drop the prosecution of 20 students and non-students who were arrested during that time.
That's correct. And the right to peacefully protest is a bedrock of democracy, and prosecutors have a duty to the law, and the highest law of the land is the Constitution, and they must also protect that and not use tactics like coercive plea bargaining. That means bringing a whole litany of charges against peaceful protesters to try to either force them to take some sort of deal or be faced with convictions at trial. And so what we've seen, and I actually just represented a gentleman who was involved in one of the December protests where 15 folks were charged, is that they come in and they file 4 or 5 charges, everything that they can do to try to essentially force the protesters into some sort of deferred or probation type sentence, and then none of them go to trial. And at the end of the day, we need to incentivize this kind of protest, because literally the day after my verdict was the attempted assassination. And that is what's inevitable if you are trying to quell what is legitimate peaceful speech, is people will resort to other methods of trying to exert their influence.
Really? You think? Okay. Laura, your thoughts?
If you think about it from a standpoint of the taxpayer's dollar and what is the best use of the taxpayer's dollar, going after everybody and drilling down on everybody is just not a good use of our funds. It's going to be a huge waste of dollars. I do think also there's an opportunity for the leadership on Auraria to think about, let's make sure our police are properly trained. Let's make sure we have the leadership in place. Let's make sure we have those conversations ongoing. Let's not let it get to an apex point where it explodes, right? Let's start those conversations now, or keep those conversations going.
Okay, all right.
Well, going back to that, when you had the Denver police kind of going in but then leaving because they didn't know what their real role was, because Auraria is in that quasi-state state entity position, students should know exactly what their rights are. And the campus should be very, very clear with them. And that was a problem at Auraria. You couldn't really tell what should happen. Of course, students should be able to exercise free speech, do it in a civil, but sometimes it's going to be disruptive way, not violent, not destructive, but they should be able to do that. It happened at DU too. Also at DU, there was some confusion over whether or not students who'd been protesting would be able to participate in graduation and everything else. I think before the next big round of protests comes up, and there will be over some issue or other, campuses need to be sure they're very, very clear with what their rules are and really think about being as accommodating as possible for free speech.
Peacefully assemble is different than what transpired in some cases, particularly on the Auraria campus. There was not a purely a victimless a kind of endeavor. There was over $300,000 worth of property damage. Free speech does not include the right to damage property or vandalize property. Free speech also does not include the right to disrupt other people's ability to go about their business, to go to class. I flash back, and Patty and I around this panel are old enough to remember the protests of the 1960s, which was another age of large-scale protest. And there was a whole different ethic there, which is the protesters who engaged in civil disobedience almost welcomed the punishment. If not welcomed it, it was part and parcel of their protest. If you break the law and make a conscious decision to do so as part of your protest, then be prepared to pay the consequences of that.
I don't think the protesters in Chicago in '68 really wanted to be beaten up by the cops.
I'm not talking about being
Okay.
beaten up.
Well, don't
but
forget,
they
we've got a convention there next month.
Okay, no, of course not. No one wants to be beaten up. But a lot of protests would lie down in the street or whatever, knowing that they were going to get arrested, knowing that they were going to get hauled off to the pokey for a few days, knowing that they were ultimately going to be taken to court to account for their actions.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was right. And I actually partially agree with you, Eric, that if they're overstepping the line of what is nonviolent and peaceful protest, there should be accountability. But that's not who's being prosecuted here. They are rounding up folks that are not doing the things that the examples that you gave, and they are doing blanket protests. They're getting charged with things like, obstructing. They're being charged with things like trespassing, not criminal mischief, not assault. And that is really the bulk of folks that are getting entangled in all of these. And when the city attorney does it, they're handling it much differently than even just the Denver DA has handled it historically. And that's where I think the rub is, and why Attorney McNulty in his press conference was calling for the dismissals.
And all I would say is if that is indeed the case, or even in the majority of cases, then Tyrone and I are in agreement, and there's no difference.
This week, TIAA announced that it will close its downtown Denver office in 2 years and relocate about 1,000 positions to Texas. The company said that, among other things, it will have substantial savings in rent. Okay, so be it commercial space or living space, or being downtown or somewhere else in Colorado, the cost of living here, the affordability, continues to be an issue. And Laura, I want to talk first with you about what's happening in Steamboat Springs. The Yampa Valley Housing Authority there bought a ranch to create some affordable housing, but the people who live there voted this idea down.
Well, in fact, they didn't buy the ranch. The Yampa Valley Housing Authority actually was given a gift of $24 million to acquire the land. It's 534 acres. It would have provided 100% affordable housing units based on income-based rent. And it would really have been geared towards specifically workforce, staff, employees in Steamboat. The problem is that the staff, the people who needed to live there, who would need that affordable housing, do not live in the city of Steamboat and therefore could not vote. It is not just service workers, it is also teachers, right? So if you love your kid's teacher, but you can't recognize that they can't afford to live in that community, it's a problem, and this is the result.
The disparity between the haves and the have-nots we see on the Front Range is so much heightened in the mountain towns where you have people buying their second, their third, their fourth vacation homes, huge amounts of money. The vote in Steamboat Springs is just part of what happened when the people who are doing the work and getting the low pay couldn't even vote. Steamboat also, the group that bought the Yellowstone Club and created that exclusive private place, just bought the old Stagecoach ski area outside of Steamboat, and they're turning it into another incredibly pricey enclave where they're going to need people who they don't pay much to serve the rich people who can buy in. So Steamboat is going the way of Aspen in our priciest towns, and it's really depressing.
There is this inherent tension that we're seeing, and Steamboat is writ large, but we're seeing it where I live up in Grand County. Patty mentioned Aspen, et cetera, between whether it's haves and have-nots, people who are already there and established, people trying to get established, and the people who are teaching schools and manning fire trucks and serving drinks at the bar. The problem in Steamboat, to my thinking, was one of scale. I think the voters as much rejected the scale of this project as they did the idea of this project. We were talking over 2,200 new units and an increase in the potential population of Steamboat Springs by nearly 50%. I think it was too much in one package, and it was a vote against scale as much as a vote against the specific plan.
One of the greatest resources in Colorado are our mountain towns. And I think Steamboat Springs needs to decide, Does it want to be a mountain town or a mountain resort, right? A resort where only the ultra wealthy, the incumbents that bought in the 70s and 80s, and folks with Airbnbs can afford to live. And then you have this sort of invisible class of folks who are coming in to service this resort, driving in hours through inclement weather. This is a number of towns around Colorado have sort of gone this way, and I think would love to have the problem of this essentially donated enclave that Steamboat Springs has. In my understanding, yes, it would, I think, be an increase in the overall population, but they're hiring for what is going to be an anticipated already going increase in demand. So I think taking advantage of this opportunity and not really just sort of staying in opposite corners of the room and coming together to try to keep this as a mountain town, because it is one of our few remaining large mountain towns in Colorado.
Right. Let's now talk about some of the highs and the lows that transpired this week. Patty, let's start with something not so great.
Well, last month we said goodbye to the Esquire Theater, and now on Thursday night we said goodbye to Chez Artistes, the second landmark theater to close. Art houses obviously have changed with the times, but it's sad to lose these cultural institutions.
So sad. Yes, I totally agree.
One more time, Alden Global Capital. We know them as the owners of the Denver Post, but they also own a number of rural papers in Colorado. They recently shut down the Brush News Tribune in Brush, Colorado. That paper had been owned for 139 years by the Bezdek family. Vince Bezdek is now the executive editor of the Gazette papers, Colorado Politics, whatever. He wrote a very moving column about it this past week in the Denver Gazette. Viewers might want to go check it out, about the loss of the only voice in a small town.
Sad report about the state public defender just came out this week, and not news to any of the state public defender employees, but maybe to the public. They're underfunded, under-resourced, and overworked. We had a similar report come out about the Aurora municipal public defenders earlier this year. So it's sad. This has sort of been the case. It's been ongoing. But hopefully with this coming to light, something can be done about this, and we can get them the resources that they need so that criminal defendants have their rights ultimately protected and have effective representation.
Yes, absolutely. Laura.
Over the past 15 years, the city of Denver has, and the state of CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, have worked to get $170 million of investment for the Colfax bus rapid transit program coming down Colfax. And there is a corner on Franklin and Colfax where old historic buildings that have been burnt down, that have been ravaged over the years, still stands, and there is a battle between the city and those trying to bring in the investment and Historic Denver, who I am a proud fan of, to resolve what to do with these buildings. And I hope, they are a disgrace on that street. And if we're going to put the public investment onto that street, we need to find some compromise about what to do with the land use adjacent to it.
Okay, good. Let's talk about something positive, Patty.
On another cultural note, we had 200 new laws take effect this week. One of the great ones is truth in advertising on ticket prices. So you now know when you're buying a ticket how much the fees and taxes are going to add to the price of that ticket. That's great. Now we just need to cut down those fees and taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Hear, hear. I want to do a quick nod to history and a quick nod to the present. On the history side, it's 50 years ago today that Richard Nixon walked away from the White House, having announced his resignation the day prior, a momentous occasion. On the present side, 3 Coloradans, I have a feeling that Laura might be talking about them, but Lindsey Horan, Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith. Let's bring home the gold medal come Saturday morning.
Soccer, yep.
And mine's a bit of a mixed bag, but hopefully I can put a positive spin on it. We've heard of, Chez Artistes and Encore and some of these other venues shuttering, but, Mutiny Information Cafe just announced that they are actually going to be closing, but They're moving down Broadway. They're going to be in Inglewood, so you can still support them. They're still going to be there. I think they're excited about their new location. They're still in the metro area. So the fate of some of our institutions that can no longer afford to operate within the city limits does not have to always be that they're closed or shuttered. It's just going to be on us as a community to continue to support them in these new locations. And they're not too far away, especially for folks who've had to move a little further outside the central city center.
It'll be odd, though, not to see them at Broadway and Ellsworth, right?
True. They're closer to me. So selfishly, I will be in there.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Laura.
I am going to go back down the U.S. women's soccer team. And yes, they are in the finals against Brazil tomorrow morning at 10, I think. But what got us there was the Colorado connection of Swanson, Mallory Swanson, assisting, passing to Sophia Smith, and Sophia Smith, putting the ball in the net. And those are two of our Colorado women, and so we should be very proud of that. We're going to come away with a minimum of a silver.
We're going for gold, though.
But we're going for gold.
Everybody watch tomorrow morning.
And just, one fact correction, I believe the game is at 9 a.m. If anyone wants to tune in.
Thank you.
I don't want people tuning in an hour late.
Just wake up at 8. Just get up early and just start watching. Okay. My high is at Live Music Lovers, and there are a lot of us here in Colorado have somewhere brand new to watch their favorite artist or group. And this is opening weekend for the new Ford Amphitheater in Colorado Springs. It's that area's first dedicated place for outdoor concerts, and the views will be spectacular. The weather's not so great this weekend, but what is great is that One Republic, which was formed down the Springs, is playing all 3 nights of this first weekend. So that is a great thing. It'll be a great place to go see shows. Thanks to our insiders for coming this week and the really great discussions. Appreciate it. Thank you all for watching every week or listening to our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12. In the meantime, go USA.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.